All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining our International Family Satsang. Today we have Nayaswami, Jyotish, and Devi, who are the spiritual directors of Ananda worldwide. And they have experience raising a son, Mark, in spiritual community as a spiritual Dwapara Yuga citizen. So they are here to share with us their lessons learned and experience and how we can live spiritual householders ourselves and raise our children. Some of us in this group have our own children. Some are teachers working closely with children. Some are godparents. Some are soon to be parents, but that have a real interest in how do we raise spiritually minded children with high principles and the spiritual life. So thank you for joining us, and such a pleasure.
Okay, well, let's start with a prayer, friends. It's so nice to be able to share with all of you. You know, this is a great, great path that we have from Master and this line of masters. And it is very, very helpful to explore how to express that and live that in various circumstances. And so this morning, let's explore how to do that as householders and family people. So let's begin. I'll just lead a prayer and follow along.
Let me just say,
Oh, okay.
I also want to greet you all and thank you for joining us. This is very important, what we're doing with these international family satsangs, because in a way, what we're talking about, the topic, is secondary to the importance of people coming together as a global family and sharing light and joy and strength. And it's so important in the world right now. And of course, Hamsa mentioned that our topic today that we'll focus on is being uh, yogi householders in Dwapara Yuga, which is a very interesting topic. So we'll begin with a prayer now.
Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, great masters, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, beloved Master, Paramahansa Yogananda Ji, saints of all religions, we humbly bow to you all. O Divine Mother, you have manifested as everyone and everything in this world. You are in us. You are in our families. You are us. You are our families. Help us to relate to everything as a divine expression of your one loving, embracing consciousness. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Well, we'll just begin with a little connection about the topic. You know, last week we had a week of inner renewal, and it was focused on the topic of how to be calm and joyful in these turbulent times. What it really was an exploration of the changing of ages from Kali Yuga to Dwapara Yuga and the teachings that will help us live successful, happy, holy lives in Dwapara Yuga. For those who get our blogs, and I hope all of you do, it would be very good. Yesterday's blog, or the blog that came out yesterday, focused on the question of Dwapara Yuga and uh, how I put in there the ideal qualities or the qualities of an ideal citizen of Dwapara Yuga. And so that helps us to understand in a broad sense, the subject. First of all, Dwapara Yuga is an age of energy. And so we have to begin to, one, see things more in terms of the energy and less in terms of the form. And secondly, we need to embrace more widely the various aspects, not only of our own lives, our own personal lives, but of a broader community, the community of our country, and beyond that, the broader community of the whole world. Master was very strong in urging us to forget about borders, forget about races, forget about the differences between us, and concentrate on uh, the similarities between us. We're all children of one God. And so if we can embrace that, um, it will bring about, if not a change in the world, because the world has its own mass karma, but it will bring about very much a change in our lives. You know, it's a little bit, we've used this image before. The times right now are stormy. So if you go out in a rainy weather, you can either let the rain drench you, or you can wear a raincoat or carry an umbrella, but you can protect yourself. So the rain and the turbulence is mass karma, but we can do things as seekers that will be protective, not only for ourselves, but for those who are close to us. So, starting from that point, it's helpful, one, to see that absolutely everything is part of our spiritual journey. And most particularly, our families are part of our spiritual journey. The people who are close to us have been drawn to us by a combination of our karma and their karma, but also they have been drawn to us, one might say specifically, in order to help us learn the lessons that we need to learn in this particular incarnation in order to be free. And so, starting from that standpoint, let's look at the question of being in a family and a family environment, being a householder. There are many responsibilities that are given to us simply by the fact that we have chosen, or life has chosen us, to be householders, and for many of us to have children. That's a responsibility that is given to us by God as an opportunity for our growth. So if we can approach everything as a spiritual adventure, it helps us distance ourselves a little bit from getting so caught up in the drama of life, the drama of personality, the drama of circumstances, all of those things that obviously play into the life of a householder and of a family. But having a little bit of distance on it allows us to maintain our center better. As I said, Dwapara Yuga is an age of energy. And if we begin to see life and those people that are close to us, I'll speak specifically about families. So if we begin to see our spouse and our children and those people that are close family members, perhaps we live with our parents, or certainly we may have responsibility toward them. If we see them more as divine forms of energy that take on a particular personality, that take on a particular, as Swami said, karma or ego is like a bundle of self-definitions. So each one of us has a bundle of self-definitions. And if we see that it simply is that way, every person is unique, every person has their bundle of self-definitions, And if we accept the fact that that is Divine Mother playing the role in that person, it helps us to back off a little bit, one from being, one might say, too involved, but more importantly, from being judgmental and being kind of a factor that's always trying to change the other person. Just let's accept people as they are. They have their own personalities, they have their own energies. Most of us are able to do that pretty well. The world, not so much. If you look at many of the problems that are present in the tensions in the world, it simply comes down to the fact that people do not appreciate other people as they are, nor do they feel that they're valid in who they are, what they are, their political party or their religion or their race or whatever it is. They reject Divine Mother in that form in order to be self-protective. And Dwapara Yuga is going to either allow us as seekers to get away from that, or it's going to force us to get away from that because that consciousness simply is not tenable. Well, coming back to the family then, we need to do the same thing, but on a softer, subtler level. We're all in a family, we're all the same race, or generally speaking, we speak the same language, we're in the same country. So those external differences are more or less not in play, but it's very, very common in families, and one of the great sources of tension in families, that we do not accept the validity of other people to be who they are. And we try either forcefully or with our own moods and maybe even nonverbal judgments to say, you're not okay. And when we put out that vibration to those who are close to us, it means they're constantly having to live in an environment where they feel judged or not okay. And that is something that, frankly, that being householders helps us overcome, or should help us overcome. At least we have to come face to face with it on a daily basis. People who aren't householders, they can sometimes avoid contact and avoid coming into having to deal with their own nature as it relates to other people. But as householders, one of the things that we have chosen spiritually is to come into that learning space, learning to accept others, learning to go beyond acceptance into appreciation and genuine love and concern, which comes to a certain sense automatically, but I'm talking here at a subtler level. The choices that we make, both emotionally and mentally, that determine kind of the vibrational milieu, or the vibrational environment of the family that we're in. And so, as citizens of Dwapara Yuga, let's work more with the energy and with the energy of children to try to help direct that in an upward level. Some of the questions that we've received will go into more how to work with children, how to help them be spiritually inclined, what to do when they run into problems from the choices they make, and so on. So we won't address that now, but I'll just end by saying that being a householder is, if we can do it well, it is maybe the most spiritually beneficial path of all. Master said something to the effect of um, being a householder, living in the world but not of it, living as a yogi is the highest path of all. And so it's a wonderful opportunity that we have. But I'll just end by saying no matter our circumstances, what we have been given to us by God, drawn to us by our karma. And let's do the very best we can to help go through life with uplifted consciousness. Many techniques help us, but that's the essence.
Thank you, Jyotish. I'll share a bit now too. You know, looking, since we've been talking about Dwapara Yuga, this age in which we live, one of the things we talked about during the classes and in a renewal retreat was, and these classes I believe are posted online and people really have gotten a lot out of them. So I encourage you to listen to them. We talked about this changing of the ages, and we're moving now from Kali Yuga, the age of form and separativeness and rigidity and hierarchy, into an age of Dwapara Yuga, which is more fluid, more the value of the individual is reestablished. But when we look at our line of gurus, we see it's interesting because Lahiri Mahachaya, Sri Yukteswar, and Master were all born in the 200-year bridge between Kali Yuga and Dwapara Yuga. So when Christ, of course, was born in Kali Yuga, and Babaji, immortal, eternal, so he doesn't really get a yuga pinned to him. But are these three most recent are all helping to bring about Dwapara Yuga by working with receptive souls. Now, out of these three that we mentioned, Lahiri Mahashaya, Sri Yukteswar, and Master, two were householders. Two, Lahiri and Sri Yukteswar, had children. And when Lahiri Mahashaya was called up into the Himalayas to receive Kriya from Babaji, he was married. He hadn't yet had he had 5 children. He hadn't yet had children. But he said after the initiation, and he'd been with his guru Babaji for some period of time, not very long, he said, "Please, Master, can I stay?" And we all know the story from autobiography. Babaji said, "No, you must go back to the world and be a model of an ideal householder, working in the world, having modest family responsibilities." And, and Lahiri, of course, obeyed his guru. And then Sri Yukteswar, we met Babaji at the Kumbh Mela for the first time in this incarnation. And Babaji called him Swami. And Sri Yukteswar objected. He said, "Well, I'm not a Swami. I'm a householder." And Babaji corrected him and said, "Anyone on who I bestow the title, it sticks." And later, of course, his wife passed, his children were grown, and he took up the vows of Swami. But all this to say, the mission, and this is important for us all to realize, the mission that our masters brought was to help to show us how to live in the world, how to live in Dwapara Yuga as yogis. And some will be married, some won't be married. But in a sense, we're all learning the lessons we need to learn. And our identity should not be, well, I'm a householder. Our identity should be, I am a yogi. And I have these responsibilities to family or job responsibilities, maintaining a home, all those things. But what is a one might say, a simple definition to be a yogi. It's to realize that your reality is not anything outside of yourself, but it is your identity with your eternal soul nature. And if we can do that, everything in life becomes clearer and simpler. We told a story, some of you may have heard this. Uh, we told it last week that in 1976, Ananda was hit by a big forest fire. Everything was burnt to the ground. Our son was just 11 days old, and we had nothing. You know, we had the clothes on our back and a box of holy items that Jyotish had gotten from the altar before the house burned down. And I was really, I was just recovering from having a child and uh, who was born at home. And, but, I thought, how am I going to take care of this child? We have no home. We have no bed for him. We have no blankets for him. And, I was agitated. And then I went inside, tried to find that soul nature. And I realized that what do you want to give to a child, especially a helpless little newborn? You want to give a sense of security, a sense of protection. And I thought, that doesn't come from anything outside yourself. It only comes from within the heart of the parents or those close around him. And when I had that realization, everything was fine and everything fell into place. And I won't go into the details, but to be a yogi householder starts by identifying through meditation, through discipleship, with your soul nature and not with anything external, personality or physical characteristics, anything. It's like, I am a soul. God has given me this child, these children to care for. And I will do it with a sense of dharma, commitment, but also with the sense of, and this is so important, non attachment. I am playing my part in the world, just as Lahiri Mahashaya played his part in the world, but he always identified with himself as an eternal soul. And so that's the first thing, to just realize to be a yogi householder starts first by being a yogi, and then you can add on every other aspect of your life, whatever it is. A profession, an interest, a hobby, any of those things. So, I see Aurelia. Hi,
Hi,
Aurelia.
Aurelia.
um, she's one of our favorite little children here at the village. But then I want to add two more points. Jyotish touched on self-accept or acceptance of the people in your life. And, you know, we can really fall back on education for life. And if you are a parent, I really urge you to read that book if it's available in your language. Uh, Education for Life, how to help. This is Swami's book, How to Help Children Face the Challenges. And in it, the theory behind Education for Life is to look at each student or each child as an individual and try to help them grow according to their own nature. Some will be more energetic, and you need to give them outward things to do. I'll tell you a little story. Once we were visiting the Ananda, one of the classrooms in the Ananda school here at the village, and there was one little boy who, I guess he was about 8 or 9 years old. He was very restless, lots of energy, and he had a hard time sitting still. And so he was a child of some friends of ours. And we went into the classroom, and there was this big map on the wall with sort of kind of little places marked, a map of Ananda, I should say, places marked all over it. And we asked the teacher, what is that? And he said, well, the little boy was an Italian little boy. His name was Alberto. And he said, Alberto has a hard time sitting still. So when he starts getting restless, I give him a walkie-talkie and I tell him to go ride his bicycle as far as he can. And when he feels to stop, call me. And then I make an X on that spot. And then he comes back and he feels like he's mapping out Ananda. But what wisdom in that? Instead of, you need to sit still, you need to be quiet, you need to stop being restless. Use that energy in a positive way. So that's just an example. But the point is, you could, I had another friend who had three daughters. And she said, the first two, I thought I was the ideal parent. They were perfect. They behaved. They listened and did everything I told them. But then I thought, oh, I really know how to be a mother. She said, then I had the third daughter. It was a totally different experience. She was rebellious and wild. And I realized it wasn't me that was helping these kids be very harmonious and obedient.
Oh,
It was the children. So the translation comes through a little bit. So the point is, the first point I want to make is try, even if you have one child, if you have many children, each one will be different. And try using the principles in education for life to respond to the needs of that child without expectations on your part. And then the last.
Let me just add, it would be very nice to have a group study of the people watching this or those who want to and go through that book and study it, but study it in such a way that you're able to discuss the actual details of your life so that you can form a kind of a support group amongst each other, but directional support group that will help you work better with the family situation.
Very good. It has so many tools that will be helpful. And then the last point I want to make, and then we can respond to some of the questions that were submitted, is our children may have the karma to be spiritual or not. We can't change that. But the most important thing is the example of our own life. And we have learned this from experience in many, many ways. I remember once Sonia, who's a teacher at the Ananda school, she just posted, great idea. We were we were living in an ashram and we would do Sunday service every Sunday. Our son was, I don't know, 5 or 6 years old, and one of his little friends, so every Sunday we did Sunday service, and one of his little friends said to him, I guess something his parents had told him from the Bible, Sunday is the day of rest. And our son said, not for my mom and dad. They have to give Sunday service every Sunday. But he watched us being committed. And that is what he has done in his life. Whatever he has picked up, he has committed to it. And he also, I could tell you, it has surprised me increasingly. I love plants, and I've always had plants in our house and a garden. I never knew our son paid any attention. So we were visiting his home. He lives about a half hour from here with a friend of ours, and he has a lot of plants. And she said, how do you know so much about gardening? And he said, from watching my mom. I never knew he watched what I was doing, but it really drove home the point that children are always observing. Another example, and I'll be wrapping up. Our son was appointed to be a manager of the business that he worked in. And he said, I'm starting off by we said, how is it going? Going to everyone in the office where I work and asking them, how can I help you? What do you need to do your job better? And just create an open door. And we said, how did you know how to do that? And he said, by watching Dad. And so he just absorbed all these things without us ever saying, now this is how you be a manager. This is how you take care of plants. And so our example, how we live our lives, is much more important than anything we say or try to impose on the children. So those are the two main points that I want to make of a more general nature.
I want to make a point here too, and this is very, very important. Do not define spirituality by whether or not your children follow the same path that you're following. If that were the definition of spirituality, almost none of us would be considered spiritual because all of us have broken away. Almost all of us have, unless you were born into a family that followed Master, all of us have broken away from the form of spirituality or the form of religion that our parents followed. But in fact, we're probably much more spiritual than our parents were. So the form is not the important thing. I would say, even though our son does not follow the path that we have followed, he is more spiritual than I would say than 50% of the people living at Ananda, following all the outward aspects. He's he's much more, in my estimation, like a Tibetan yogi, where it's the devotional aspect of our path that doesn't attract him. But dharma, karma, right action, all of those fundamental spiritual aspects, he understands better than most people here. So it doesn't matter about our son. He's just an example. The point I want to make, but I do want to make it very strongly, don't define whether your children follow the path you follow as whether they're spiritual or not. And as Devi said, model for them uplifted consciousness and right behavior, and then try to help them have uplifted consciousness and right behavior, but expressed however is comfortable for them. Okay, so
I want to add one more thing before we go on to
we're going to take up the whole time here.
When our son was till about 2 years old, I had been on the path for 6 years before he was born, and I would meditate every morning, every evening, and it was a very important part of my life. And then when he was born, after things settled down and we had a place to live, whenever I would sit to meditate, I mean, it could be 2 a.m, it could be 2, and he just went down for a nap. Okay, now I can meditate. As soon as I would start meditating, anytime, day or night, he would wake up and start crying. And hi, Amelia, someone explained to me later that he feels your energy withdrawing from the world and it scares him. And that's why he wakes up. And so, to be honest, I just stopped trying. I mean, I would do a little bit, maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes here and there, but it was a wonderful self-offering surrender for me, because before I thought, I could meditate whenever I wanted to, as long as I wanted to. But now it was like, no, there's another dharma here that I'm trying to deal with, that I must deal with, that God has given me to deal with. And that's to surrender to what is, not what I want it to be. And it was wonderful training. And then after a while, I could get back to a habit of meditation, but I learned a lot from that. Okay. So Gayatri, I know, you're muted, but do you want to ask us the questions, or should we have them? You sent them to us. Should we just read them and answer?
Sure. Do you want to read the ones you have? And then I have a few more as well.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay, so among all the relationships with children are very special and often bring much more pain than relationships with partners. After all, you can leave your partner or your job, but your love for your child and responsibility for them remains for life. On the one hand, it's clear that children don't belong to us, just as we are God's children and given to us for quite a short period of time. For us as devotees, the answer is always the same: love for God and complete trust in Him, prayer for our children. On the other hand, hearing real stories of people who have gone through similar experiences is a great support and inspiration. So let's take on that. Yes, when you have a child come into your life, you are parents for the rest of your life. There's no getting away from it. I'm in my 80s now, and I'm certainly just as much a parent now as I was when our child was instead of he's now nearly 50. So instead of when he was 50, when he was 5 months or 5 years old.
I will interject, you're more of a parent now than when he was 5 months old.
Yeah. And so that bond of soul to soul that is there from the parents to the child, that never breaks during this lifetime. And so the form of how you relate obviously has to change. And so for those things that are inevitable, let's not be sad about them. Let's celebrate them. Isn't it wonderful that God gives us this kind of a bond that simply will last for the entire incarnation? But then after this incarnation, that bond is still there on a soul level, but it goes underground. Our son, let's say you were parents of a child who died young. He could be born in the house next door to you, and you wouldn't feel any responsibility or perhaps any connection to him, except your soul would resonate. So it's a bond that is both eternal, but it's strong in one lifetime and then goes underground. But coming back really to the question, yes, we can't get away from it in this lifetime. And so if you can't get away from it, then what is it that's going to make it uplifted and powerful? The first is love and support and acceptance. We already talked about acceptance, but honestly, our son drove us nuts. He was a very rebellious child. Teenager, yeah. Because he was very independent as a young boy. But then by the time he hit adolescence, he became quite rebellious. And we had to really work, but we never lost our love for him. We had to try to discipline him at times. We had to try to work with his energy. We had to do everything we could for a period of about, I would say, 6 or 7 years, from adolescence until he left our household at age 18. But we never lost our love and support for him. But the difficulty in working with the child, and that's one of the questions that makes choices that we see could be troublesome or lead to some self-destructive behaviors. We didn't know how to deal with it except to do the best we could. And honestly, it helped us a great deal having a spiritual life where we could retreat to finding calmness and balance inside, because for a period of time there wasn't much outside. But we never lost love for him. And I must say, I never lost respect for him. I saw the rebellion not as something negative, but as him trying to express his own strength and the fact that he needed to live his own life. And I actually had, under the surface of having to try to discipline, I had a lot of respect for who he was, which never ended. But nonetheless, I didn't respect his behavior.
Well, I'll respond to that a little bit too. It's very, okay, how do I put this? In any friendship, in any marriage, and in any child-parental relationship, it's never a static thing. It's always changing. It's always evolving. Jyotish and I have been, we'll be married 51 years this year. And, our relationship has gone through many, many different phases. And fortunately, all of them good. We had lessons to learn. It wasn't always easy, but it changes. Same with friendship, and also the same with children. We need to understand that our relationship as parents needs to evolve over time in response to who they are at any particular stage and what they need from us. Um, our son was just telling us he has three children, and he has a son who's 14, who's starting to be a little rebellious, not as bad as Mark was, but he is. But Mark told us, he said, he was the youngest of the children, the son of the three children, and he was kind of always the baby. And because of that, he was always treated a little bit like the baby. And now and Mark said the other day something happened where he wasn't very respectful to the family and so forth. And he said, I really sat down with him and we talked for an hour. And I told him, you're not a child anymore. You're starting to set patterns in your life that will define who you become as an adult. And you need to be responsible for the chores you have at home. You need to be respectful to your parents and so on. And he said his son, our grandson, was just crying. And he said, but he really changed in that moment. And he said, now we're starting to do things together, like two friends, rather than he's the little boy, the little baby kid in the family. And so it's very important. And also with our son who's 50, we're starting we've done it a number of times, but it's a pattern where he lives near Nevada City. We'll go into town maybe once every few weeks, have lunch with him, just the three of us. And we talk about spiritual things. He talks about kind of things he's working on, both on a practical level and on an inward level. We give him advice on a practical level and on a spiritual level. And I can see it's really evolving into like three friends sharing spiritual insights, really. And it just evolved. It just happened at this point in our life. So the point I'm making here is um, the relationship. I often feel like Mark might have been my father or my brother, and probably was in all of different lives, but that it evolves over time. And it's if you can just enjoy that and always try to be letting it move to the next level. Don't get fixed into place. This is what we do. And and then it becomes for everybody an expanding, growing process.
Okay, the next question is it possible to foster interest in spirituality in children? If so, how? Yes and no. The soul comes into this incarnation with a range of experiences, but souls aren't drawn to devotees unless there's some resonance with spirituality. So I would say we don't so much as foster it as we take what's there. It's like somebody giving us a plant. The plant is already living, and we might transplant it, we might put it somewhere, and then we might water it, but we don't give it life. So the spiritual plant of our children already exists. What we can do is to provide, first of all, and most importantly, our own model of being spiritual, however that's defined. But it's got to be real and it's got to be put into daily practice, because just like watching his mother love for plants and his father some skills of leadership, the children are observing us. And if you tell them what to do and you don't do it yourself, it's not going to be at all workable. So you've got to live what you want your child to develop, then offer gently and include the child as much as they're willing to be included. And if you can do that, then their innate interest will gradually grow.
We should maybe have Gayatri ask us some of the, because I see there's a lot of online questions.
Okay.
But I just wanted to share one little thing. When her two younger grandchildren were quite young, maybe 3 and 4, like that, they would come over to our house, and we have a meditation room, and they would run in there and and close the door of the meditation room. And I said, "What are you doing in there?" And they said, "We're going into outer space." And that's what it felt like to them, that it was like an altered reality. And I could hear them going, vroom, vroom. So it was actually
Charming.
charming. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, Gayatri.
So one of the questions that came in, as parents, we make lots of decisions for our children that they can't do anything with. Example, where to go to school, where to move. What ways in meditation can we hear intuition? What's better for the child, not us?
Very good
Yeah,
question.
very good question. You want to start?
Okay. Again, it comes down to knowing what are your child's needs, like maybe you have sometimes we don't have a choice. We get a job, maybe the mother or father gets a job and they have to move, and it's not ideal for the child, but there isn't a choice then. But if there is a choice, then try to consider the needs of everyone in the family, and to, again, and we have friends who had to move uh, to a not very great environment with their children, but they really worked hard to find schools that these were children that had been in Ananda schools, and they to find schools that were uh, responsive to the needs of the children. And so the children went to two different schools because one had a lot of sports and one was more artistic, and so they responded. So again, in any human relationship, it's always a bit of compromise. It's not just this is how I think and this is what it's going to be. And in a family, there has to be a blending of the needs of everyone. And so just try to take in, knowing your child or children, take into mind what's the best situation for them given the outer circumstances.
So I'm going to add something here. And I'm going to recommend this practice. Devi and I started about a year ago. Before we go to bed, for the last 10 minutes or so before we go into sleep, we always read something from Master. And doing that repetitively has helped my attunements, almost like I live in his consciousness now, much more than before when I didn't have that habit. So I would highly, highly recommend that. Having said that, last night I was reading from an article, and he was talking about how to gain understanding. He made three major points at the beginning. One, in order to have understanding, you have to be aware of what you're doing. And so if there are changes in your family that affect your children, be aware of that. Don't put it on automatic pilot, and be aware of your children and their needs. And the more you're aware of those things, the more you'll be able to make choices. The other thing that he said was that if we're taken out of our center by fear, anxiety, moods, anything that takes us out of a calm, centered awareness, then we won't understand and we'll make bad choices. So get centered, be aware of everybody's needs, and then ask Master, how can I best deal with this?
I know we're running out of time, and I probably shouldn't take up time with this, but I just have to share a very charming story from when our son was little, because we would read to him every night stories and try to choose stories that were uplifting, showed, dharmic people and righteous action and so forth. And he loved it. He always, one more story every night. And then one night he just wanted one more story, one more story. So I said, when you grow up, you're going to have to read so many stories to your children for all the stories that I've read to you. And he paused and he said, well, very thoughtful, 8 years old maybe. Did your mommy read you stories? And I said, yeah. And then he said, well, where did she get the books? And I said, what do you mean, where did she get the books? Weren't they real rare in those days? No, it wasn't the medieval times where there was just the Gutenberg Bible. No, we had books when I was growing up. So anyway, that wasted time, but it just popped into my mind.
Too much fun not to share. Okay, Gayatri.
Another question, how can we help develop discernment to understand the difference between dharma and our karma when parenting, so we respond a place of clarity rather than conditioning or past patterns?
Good.
Yeah, that's a very good and important question. The more you can get inside, first of all, we have to accept that all of us are largely influenced, and for many people in the world, almost totally influenced by the combination of past karma and circumstances and mass consciousness. So for many people, there's only a tiny little window where there's real choice that they make. How do we, and we're dealing with those influences too, how do we make that window of actual choice bigger than what it is? The first is to withdraw from the influence of those outward mass consciousness, withdraw into meditation, and withdraw, if possible, in meditation from the sense that the soul is eternal and the soul has lived many lives in many circumstances. So try to, if not feel and know, at least to imagine the fact that this particular personality and set of circumstances you're in is only one of many, many that you've experienced. And if you can get a little bit distance from being caught up in all of the other influences outside of your ability to decide and get more into your soul nature, then you'll have a much better chance of broadening that window of decision until finally the window of decision becomes completely open. But then, much to your amazement, you'll find that you don't have any choice at all. All you can do at that point is follow God's will. So it's really a matter of choosing to align your individual will with God's will. And I must say personally, that desire has gotten deeper and deeper until it is, I would say, the most powerful stream of consciousness that I have at this point is to have my will completely aligned to the will of God, especially as expressed through Master.
This is addressing a question that came up earlier, but it's something I wanted to share. I think it's very important for all of us in dealing with children and developing their spirituality. It's been my observation that the children being born, maybe the last two generations, say from newborn till, I don't know, 15, in that age range, there are many, many high souls being born, many souls that have much more awareness than I did when I was growing up. And I think the world is changing, and high souls are being drawn to the world at this time. Will they be spiritual in the sense that they follow Master's path? I don't know. I don't know that. But what I do know is like that they will have a great, and they're being born into our families because we will give them the environment to let their own spirituality develop. And I think it's very important that's why to get to know what are the spiritual interests of your child? Not what are my spiritual interests, but what is their trajectory and what role will they play in the future to help form a better world than the one that exists right now. And so I think it's very, very important to, again, it comes back to acceptance of who the child is, respect that they have a part to play in their own way, in their own unique way in the world. Um, and, it's just, we, Master said specifically, parents should not push their spiritual path on their children. He said, if they come to it naturally, good. But by pushing it on them, if it's not theirs, then it causes a resistance. And so to recognize that the world is changing, we are formative in creating centers, communities, households with spiritual vibration. But then let the new children, the next generation coming up, let them take what we give them and build a world according to their own dharma and karma.
Master said, and this is important, he said, self-realization has come to unite the world. And so self-realization is going to unite the world, but not an organization and not a specific form. So both in yourself and your children, foster self-realization, not necessarily the form of it.
And Nitai, who's the head of, started the Ananda school system, recently we were having a conversation and he said, I've watched thousands of young people graduate from the Education for Life schools, Living Wisdom schools. He said, most of them do not become devotees, but they all become positive, well-integrated, contributive souls. And that's important to remember.
Okay, maybe one or two more questions.
This is speaking a lot of what you were talking about, fostering children spiritually. Certainly it's easier in spiritual community because of the supportive environment. What about out in the world?
Yeah, there's an idealistic answer. Any place in the world you can produce a supportive spiritual environment within the home. But on a realistic basis, it does help to have support from other devotees. That's why Master and Swami were so strong about creating community. Well, you all have a virtual community, and so the more that you can connect with that, the more you will have a community that influences and uplifts your consciousness, and the thought of studying specifically those things which will help you be better householders, it would be very supportive to you.
And if you can, bring your children. I know there's wonderful centers in Russia. There's some starting in France, of course, the Assisi community. And I know the Assisi community, and here in America, we have family camp. In fact, Peter and Gayatri help organize it. And bring your children, come as a family to these events. We took our oldest granddaughter, who's now going to be 30 this year, when she was 16, we took her to Assisi, and she was part of it's like a teenage youth camp. And it changed her life. It was one of the most formative things that happened for her. So even if you don't live in a community, find ways to give your children a spiritual experience.
It just occurred to me, Peter and Gayatri face this. Here we have this wonderful supportive environment at Ananda Village, one of the honestly best in the world. But the number of householders with children in it are maybe 5% of the community. So the group online right at this moment is almost a better spiritual community for householders of parents or householders with children than any living community, because the living communities are mainly adult, and they certainly support the adult consciousness, but you all have a chance to support each other as parents.
So I think we'd better end because people are having to leave now. But maybe I'll just close with maybe a prayer and visualization. So let's start, those of us who have children or grandchildren, feeling God's blessings and protection and guidance on our family and extended family. And feel God's protection and guidance on our community and the schools that our children go to. May their teachers and their friends help create an uplifted environment for them. And then let's visualize our nation being guided by divine dharma, justice, and freedom. And then in a spirit of one world family, let's feel all of our families, our children, our communities, our nation, all one world in God's light. And let's just chant Om together, sending out God's blessings on children everywhere. Om. God bless you all. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for sharing. Have a pleasant evening, and we'll see you sometime in the relatively near future.
Thank you, Jyotish and Devi.
Thank you.